Magic Tree House, a Merlin mission. Carnival at Candlelight. Chapter 8. Home by Day. Jack could hear the flapping of wings and the sound of steady breathing. The lion flew in circles above the whirlpool. Then he soared in a great arc up through the sky. "We're going back now," cried Annie. Jack lowered his head. He buried his face against the lion's shaggy wet mane. He didn't look up. He was too tired to think as he gave himself over to the lion's wondrous powers of flight. The lion carried Jack and Annie back through the dawn. As they glided over the calm sea, the water sparkled with light from the rising sun. By the time the lion reached the skies over Venice, darkness had turned to day. Shades of lavender glowed above the city's towers, domes, and spires. Venice was veiled in a soft pink light. The lion flew to St. Mark's Square. He glided toward the clock tower, moving more and more slowly. Finally he landed softly, like a cat, on the terrace of the tower. Jack took a deep breath and stroked the lion's golden mane. Then he and Annie climbed off the lion's back. Jack's legs felt wobbly. He clutched the lion for a moment to get his balance. The lion let out a low growl. He turned his huge head and licked Jack's hand. His rough tongue felt like sandpaper. Jack laughed. Annie laughed too, as the lion licked her. "You were magnificent," she said. "Yeah," said Jack, "that was a great ride." The lion let out a purr. Then he pulled away from the two of them and padded to the edge of the terrace. The lion gave Jack and Annie one last look over his shoulder. Then he leapt over the terrace railing and landed silently on the ledge below. Looking over the railing, Jack and Annie watched the living lion become a statue again. In an instant, his shaggy mane, golden back, powerful legs, tufted tail, and feathered wings all turned to carved gray stone. "Oh," said Jack sadly. He missed the living lion inside the stone statue. A thundering bong made Jack and Annie jump. Beside them, the two bronze men were striking their gigantic bell. They struck it 6 times. "It's 6 in the morning," said Annie. "We're gone a long time." "Yeah," said Jack. He looked at the angel weather vane now. "Hey, look at the angel weather vane now," said Annie. Jack looked up at the golden angel on top of the watchtower. The weather vane was turning in the wind. It suddenly stopped and pointed toward the west. "Remember the last lines from Merlin's letter?" said Annie. She recited from memory. "An angel of gold will show you the way to the sea by night and home by day." "I guess now that Venice is safe, the angel is telling us it's time to go home," said Jack. "Yep," said Annie. Jack picked up his backpack and he and Annie headed down the stairs of the tower. When they reached the bottom, they stepped out of the darkness into the bright morning light. Only a few puddles of water dotted the square. Carnival had ended. The people in costume had all gone home. A flock of pigeons fluttered noisily about the cobblestones, picking at orange peels and squashed grapes, torn ribbons and feathers. There was no sign of the flood except for some patches of seaweed. Jack turned and looked up at the clock tower. The morning sun cast a rosy light over the lion's stone body. The lion stood with pride and dignity, watching over St. Mark's Square. His great power is a secret to everyone but Jack and Annie. "Thanks again," said Annie to the lion. "Yeah, thanks," whispered Jack. Then he sighed, exhausted. "Home," he said. Annie nodded. As Jack and Annie headed across the square, 2 sweepers were cleaning up the remains of the carnival. "Oh, wow!" cried Annie. She ran toward the sweepers just as they were about to scoop up a pile of trash. She snatched something from the ground. Annie ran back to Jack. "Look," she said, held up Teddy and Kathleen's book of magic rhymes. "Oh, great," said Jack. He took the little book from her. It was damp from the floodwaters, but all the writing was clear as ever. "We have 8 rhymes left," said Jack, "for our next 3 journeys." He dropped the rhyme book into his backpack. As Jack and Annie left St. Mark's Square, they saw Venice starting to wake up. Ordinary, everyday Venice. Not the Venice of Carnival. Men, women, and children were opening stalls and putting out goods to sell. Cobblers were sitting at their workbenches, and cats were stretching in the chilly sunlight. The old man was walking his fat little dog Rosa. He waved at Jack and Annie, and they waved back. "No one knows Venice was almost destroyed by a flood last night," said Jack. "And no one knows we helped save her," said Annie. "They just think we're a couple of ragged clowns." Jack smiled. He'd forgotten they were still wearing their carnival costumes. Now their clown suits were dirty, torn, and soaking wet. Their hats were gone, and somewhere in the floodwaters or the flight of Neptune, Jack's slippers had lost their bows. "How will we get back to the treehouse now?" said Annie. "I don't know," said Jack. "I guess we'll have to find a boat to take us there." As they scanned the waterfront, Jack saw a boy sitting at the edge of water on a small stool. The boy was painting. "Hey, isn't that Lorenzo Topolo?" said Jack. He and Annie hurried over to the boy. "Hi, Lorenzo," said Annie. Lorenzo glanced up and smiled. "Hello, Annie and Jack," he said. Jack and Annie looked at Lorenzo's painting. It showed pink light shimmering on blue water. "That's beautiful," said Annie. "It's only the background," said Lorenzo. He squinted at the canal. "Soon I will add gondolas and people. Then probably I'll add something not real at all, something from my imagination." "Hey, guess what? We saw Neptune last night," said Annie. "You did?" said Lorenzo. "We found him far out at sea. He looked just like he looks in your dad's painting." "We rode to him in the back of a flying lion on the clock tower," said Annie. Lorenzo nodded. "I am glad Neptune still lives in the deep sea," he said, "and I am glad one of our lions still flies. Many people would believe all the magic has left our world." "The magic will never leave," said Annie. "Not if painters like you and your dad keep painting." Lorenzo looked thoughtful. Then he picked up his small canvas and handed it to Jack. "You and Annie can take this and finish it," he said. "Paint what you saw on your visit to Venice." "Really?" said Jack. "Are you sure?" "Yes," said Lorenzo. "You and Annie have the gift of imagination. Use it to make something magical." "We will," said Annie. "Thanks," said Jack. "We'll start painting as soon as we get home." "Hey, Jack," said Annie. She pointed at a gondola docked nearby. It looked like the same boat that had brought them to Carnival the night before. Inside were the same two people, the gondolier and the person with the lantern. Their candle had gone out, but they were both still wearing black cloaks, white gloves, and masks with bird beaks. "Maybe they can take us back to the treehouse," said Jack. "Excuse me," Annie called. "Can you give us a ride back to the island?" Annie pointed across the water. The gondolier nodded. "Great," said Annie. "Bye, Lorenzo. Thanks." She and Jack hurried to the landing where the gondola waited for them. Chapter 9. The Painting. The gondolier silently helped Jack and Annie into the boat. Then he untied the gondola and pushed off from the landing. As the boat guided through the shallow waters, Jack looked back at Venice. Bathed in early sunlight, the grand lady of the lagoon did seem timeless. The gondola moved around the bend and up the narrow canal near the walled garden. The gondolier tied the boat to a striped pole. He then offered his gloved hand to Annie and helped her out of the boat. Annie climbed out, and the gondolier offered his hand to Jack. As the gondolier helped Jack into the landing, the boat rocked in the water. Jack tripped, pulling the glove off the gondolier's hand. "Oh, sorry," said Jack. As he handed the glove back, he gasped. On the gondolier's finger was a pale blue glass ring. Before Jack could say anything, the gondolier pulled his glove back on and pushed the boat away from the landing. Hey, Jack sputtered. "Teddy? Kathleen? Wait! Come back!" Neither of the masked people looked back at Jack and Annie. "Teddy and Kathleen? Where?" said Annie. "His glove came off. There was a blue glass ring on his finger," said Jack. Jack and Annie watched the gondola as it disappeared into a blaze of sunlight shining on the water. Had it just glided around the bend, or had it vanished altogether? "Are you sure it was them?" said Annie. "Well, I guess anybody could wear a glass ring," said Jack. "But still—" "Maybe Morgan and Merlin told them to watch over us," said Annie. "Yeah, to make sure we'd be safe," said Jack. "And be patient and follow instructions," said Annie. "Right," said Jack. "Well, Venice wasn't destroyed by a flood, so I guess we passed our first test." "I think we did," said Annie. With Lorenzo's canvas tucked under his arm, Jack led the way to the walled garden. Annie followed him to the rope ladder. When they climbed into the treehouse, Jack pulled Merlin's letter from his backpack. He unfolded it and pointed to the words Frog Creek. "I wish we could go there," he said. "Goodbye, grand lady of the lagoon," said Annie. And the wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. A nippy wind rustled the Frog Creek trees. Jack and Annie were wearing their jeans and jackets again. It was dawn. Annie sighed. I wish we'd had a little more time to visit Venice, she said. I'm glad Lorenzo gave us his painting to finish, said Jack. That'll be like living our trip all over again. Cool, said Annie. We'd better leave Morgan's research book here, said Jack. He pulled a black book out of his backpack and put it on the floor. And this, he took out Teddy and Kathleen's book of magic rhymes. Wait, said Annie. Don't you think we should take the book of rhymes with us for safekeeping? Jack nodded. We can't use them in Frog Creek, he said. We'll just keep it safe till we go to our next mission. That's what I was thinking, said Annie. Come on, hurry before Mom and Dad wake up. Jack put the book of rhymes back into his pack, carrying Lorenzo's canvas. Annie climbed down the ladder. Jack followed. As they walked through the chilly dawn woods, Annie held up Lorenzo's canvas. The shimmering light and waters of Venice looked just like they had in real life. So what should we put in our painting? She asked. Gondolas, of course, said Jack, with people in costumes. Wearing black capes and bird masks, said Annie, and fancy dresses and wigs. And we could paint the clock tower in the background, said Jack, with 2 men striking the bell. And the watchtower, too, said Annie, with the gold angel on top. And the ruler's palace, said Jack. And the old man and Rosa walking along the canal, said Annie, and of course Lorenzo, and the lion flying across the sky, said Jack, and Neptune's spear rising out of the water, with Neptune himself peeking out, said Annie. We'll show just the top of his head and his mysterious eyes. That's a lot of stuff for one painting, said Jack. We didn't even put ourselves in it yet, said Annie. We'll paint ourselves in the back of the lion, said Jack, wearing our clown suits and red slippers. Yeah, with huge smiles on our faces, said Annie, like we're thinking, wow, 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 Jack laughed. A chilly dawn breeze swept the bare trees. The bells of Frog Creek Church began to chime. Jack and Annie took off running for home.